Welcome to another episode of Waves of Wisdom. In this episode, I'm going to speak to someone from South Africa who is a futurist and a global speaker. She has been the past president of Global Speakers Federation as well as the South African Speakers Association as well. And she is none other than Charlotte Kemp, all the way from South Africa. We are recording this episode in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being here with you.
How are you doing, Charlotte?
Good. I'm enjoying this trip to Malaysia and enjoying meeting people from all over the world coming for this particular conference.
Mm-hmm. Charlotte, to start with, I know that you are known as a futurist, future alchemist,
yes,
or something like that. Yeah. Can you explain a little bit of that to our audience, how you got that name?
The alchemy part is just part of the branding and the fun, but alchemy is that ancient proto-science of theoretically turning lead into gold. But alchemy is all about identifying the elements, the lower order elements in anything, and then working on how to transmute them and transcend them into something higher. So there's lots of people who do alchemy. Speakers do alchemy. Anybody who's working with other people trying to help them discover what's inside of themselves, it's a process of alchemy. But in terms of being a futurist, I work with all the academic and business models that help people work out how to prepare for the future. But I actually like to focus on the part that's the mindset. How do we think about the future? Why do we believe what we do? How are we planning and crafting the future that we would like to be in, our more preferred future?
It's wonderful. I'm sure this is not something you have thought when you were a child or when you were in school or college, right?
Yeah.
So how this came about, why you got interested in this particular topic?
Yeah. Well, interestingly, I have a particular photograph in my portfolio it represents 5 different career elements that I had, including being a futurist, a professional speaker, previously a social media expert, working with associations as an association executive and coaching. And it's all represented by this one particular photograph, but none of those careers could I have studied or learned about in school, in university. You can now. There are now some degrees and things that qualifications you can get. But when I was younger, that wasn't available. So this is an evolving field. But I was a professional speaker. I was working in the speaking space. I was teaching people about social media at the time. But I thought if I had to talk about Twitter one more time, I was going to go crazy. And I wanted something more meaningful. And I went to a career guidance counselor. And she was helping my daughter discover what she should study after school. And so I went to her as well. And she helped me unpack what my interests were. And then she said, there is a field called futures thinking. And the minute I discovered it, I felt like I'd come home. I've always loved science fiction. I've always loved scenarios about the future. My really early career was in financial services, and I was working as a portfolio manager for a retirement annuity. So I always had this projection of how do things work out later? How do we prepare? Or what mistakes are we going to make now that will have a huge impact in the future? And so this all made sense. So I had to go back to school to now study and learn. And I've done some courses and joined the Association of Professional Futurists as a student member and had to qualify as a professional member. And it just really is a fascinating field. There are so many different approaches, so many really interesting people, and such incredible work being done, not just to project how to make a profit or how to do something, but what would the long-term consequences be of a policy like this, or decisions like that, or one government over another government, or how we actually live our lives. And all of that kind of plays out. And it really is a fascinating field.
Yeah, I'm sure, because there's one thing sure about the future. It is going to change. It is not going to be as of today, because when we look at the past also, it always changes, right? Growing up, what were you interested in?
Growing up, science fiction. And not all futures thinking is about science fiction, but I found it to really be a great way to kind of explain a lot of those ideas. I love science fiction. I loved reading. I loved stories about kind of different perspectives from what I had. And I grew up in Cape Town in South Africa, well, in various kind of provinces in South Africa. We moved around quite a bit. But I had I knew that I had a very small view of the world. It was only much later in my life that I had the opportunity to travel like we're doing now. And that has opened up a whole lot of ideas. So kind of growing up, I had this curiosity about what was out there and what was going to happen in the future. And it's taken me a while to be able to kind of not find the answers, but sort of have the conversations with people where I can start to explore that. And that just grew out from a curiosity as a young person.
So this comes to a point where I want to ask, because the topic which I am currently working on, the unretirable, the foundation of it is actually finding somebody's purpose. And a lot of people says your purpose is something you love to do when you had no pressure in life, right?
Yes. That's
so
good.
Does that has some connection between you finding this path and your love for science fiction as a child?
I think so, yes. I personally have a concern when we talk about purpose, because it's so powerful and it can be such a driving force. But a lot of people feel like they have to find their purpose, like there's something that is there that's bestowed on them somehow. And if they don't discover it, then they've missed out. Whereas I find my purpose has evolved over the years, and my values, sometimes people say values don't change. My values have changed fundamentally as I've grown older and as I've started to listen to my own children. I've learned new things, and that's all evolved. So purpose is really important, but I think we do have seasons in our lives, and it's helpful to, when you're in a particular season, to say, you know, if my purpose right now in this season is taking care of these people or taking care of this job and doing that, it might not stir my soul completely, but it is my purpose for the season. Yeah. And I'll have another season later. And that's why I love your unretirable kind of concept, because you can move to a different season and rediscover a passion that you had years before, or lean into something that is really important to you that you've not had the opportunity to do in the past. Yeah. I just feel sometimes people think, if I've got a purpose, everything has to be about that. And we don't have to have it so defined. It can evolve because we're changing. Yeah. Like you just said, we're changing. The world is changing. Just allow that purpose to evolve and enjoy where you're at, and then know that it might change again in the future, and that's okay.
I think you are very right. And this is one reason a lot of people struggle, because they don't take action thinking that they haven't found their purpose.
Yeah.
But actually, even in my life, becoming an international speaker was a journey of actually finding my own purpose or my own passion.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know that whether I would love it or enjoy it until I do it, right?
Yeah.
I think that is very, very important. So going back to your topic about
futures thinking.
Yeah, futures thinking. How it is different from critical thinking or other kind of philosophies out there with related to thinking?
All right. So I'll give you one example. A lot of times in business and in business models, we're talking about strategic planning. A more academic term for futures thinking is called strategic foresight. And so when we're applying a futures thinking lens to something, we're not just trying to solve this problem now or this plan. We're intentionally trying to create that divergent kind of concept in our minds to embrace multiple ideas, to be able to hold conflicting realities in our brain at the same time, to be able to consider alternative political points or religious perspectives, and to be able to give everything, not to say that everything is right or appropriate, but to be able to consider it entirely before making a snap judgment. So although we're talking about the future and everybody feels like with technology, everything's getting faster, I like to think of myself as a slow futurist. So we have to slow down and talk and think and do philosophy. So when it comes to thinking, it's not just rushing to an idea or an answer. It's exploring what could be, what are the alternatives. That's why science fiction is important, because it shows you what those alternatives can be. One of the tools we use is called scenario planning. And in scenario planning, you can explain it this way. If you're talking about a business and they put together a business plan, it's like, we are hoping that this will happen. These are the contingencies and you know, the factors, etc. And they make a plan and a marketing plan and a people plan, etc. But if you're doing scenario planning with a futures mindset, you also do a worst case scenario and a best case scenario, and you work them out. And then you're not saying that it's going to be bad and miserable and wrong or brilliant, but now your brain is opened up to encounter all of those ideas. Now you can identify flags and indicators. And when something goes wrong or when an opportunity comes, you don't panic, you don't overreact because your brain is already embracing these different ideas. So a lot of it is about thinking, and critical thinking is part of just the tool set of things we can explore.
Yeah, I think that's very important, isn't it? Especially with the new technologies emerging with AI and everything. So have you thought about that relating to what is the future like with AI?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. There's lots of debate. There are problems with AI. There are concerns. There are things we need to take seriously. But I also think that AI gives us an opportunity to do certain work better and deeper. It's not to be relied on as an alternative or a replacement for humans. That just doesn't work. I was on a panel. I was moderating a panel of like serious AI experts, and one of them said something. They said, "But of course, we've seen this all before." I thought, we've never seen AI before, but they were talking about back, in the dark ages before we had computers in the office. And when we're bringing computers in, people were saying it's going to take my job, and what are we going to do? And everybody kind of panicked about it. And then there were job losses. There were huge adjustments. But then people worked out other ways to work with that technology so that now we can do more than we ever could before. So the same thing, I know that there's deeper concerns as well, but the same thing should be seen with artificial intelligence. We have to understand it better. We have to be able to use it, and we have got to just relying on it to produce something. And I'm going to give you a really shocking example from my own home country. The South African government recently tabled a policy that they were going to take to vote on it at government level. And it was our artificial intelligence policy. Like, how is the country going to deal with artificial intelligence? And the Minister of Communication was bringing it forward. And it had gone through like various committees and everything else and been signed off. And now it's like getting like public opinion and everything. And then it's going to be tabled. And somebody actually read through it and discovered that a number of the citations were completely fictitious. Somebody had used AI to draft the AI policy, and AI had hallucinated. And that's the point, that we have got to be careful of that. We can't be lazy. And I think that is probably one of the biggest problems, is people just going to rely on it. I have to say, in terms of government, that the minister owned his mistake. He said that South Africa deserves better than this, and they withdrew it and they've gone back to do their homework. But a lot of other times people just push these things through without understanding what they're trying to create. So it's a credible tool, but we can't just abdicate to it. It has to enhance our creativity and our humanity, that we can do more with AI rather than use it to be lazy. Yeah.
I think it's very important, right? When we can just ask AI, for example, even image generation. I was generating an image for the speech this weekend, and it didn't come the way I wanted, because the actual image is in my mind, even though I'm using AI as a tool, for example, to generate that image so I can show other people. But the image is in my mind already. I think that is where the creativity is coming from.
And it's great for digging deeper. So during COVID, I came up with a concept as a futurist, and I called it being a conscious futurist. And it had 5 different levels. It's a spiral diagram. And it starts with like you're at survival level, then responsible, invested, conscious futurist, and then transcendent. And I did a lot of work on it, and I did it as a keynote, and it's a book, and I've been paid for this work, and it's good work. And then one day I'm sitting at my desk trying to take that content and turn it into a learning program. And so I'm working with AI, and we're kind of like interrogating the topic to make sure I've got the depth of it. And obviously I've searched online for anybody else talking about this concept. And there's a reference to being conscious about the future, but at that time there wasn't any other content that I could find. And then eventually I asked AI the question, what am I missing in this? What have I thought I've covered, which is a glaring gap that I haven't seen? And is anybody else doing anything like this? And so it gives me some insight into my work. And then he says, of course, the University of Turkey has got this program. And so I follow the links through, And there is this really incredible body of work about conscious futurism, which I had not found because it's the University of Turkey and the original landing pages were in Turkish and I'd not got through to the English version. But of course, AI could do that. So now AI can bring that to me and make me aware of it so that now the work I'm doing is way deeper and recognizes and acknowledges that other work that has been done so I can do better work. That's how we should be using AI.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shall I ask a very bold question? What is the future like with AI in another 20, 30, 40 years?
Yeah. I think we have an opportunity. All right, I'm going to answer in a very bold way. We do have the resources on this planet, the intelligence and the creativity of human beings, the technology for us all to live better lives, for people to have a universal basic income. I believe that. For there to be proper healthcare that's available to people, proper education. All of that is there. Our problem is not artificial intelligence or artificial intelligence taking jobs. Our problem is humans hoarding opportunity and money to themselves intentionally so that other humans are left desperate so that they will comply with the rules. Our problem is social and political. It's not artificial intelligence. It will emphasize
creating an arbitrage, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because some people create an arbitrage on the resources.
Okay, yeah.
So they can benefit from it.
Yeah.
That's why some people are left without those resources.
And it's a social plan. It's intentional.
I think the English terminology came quite well with it.
Yeah.
Haves and have-nots.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And AI will make that more glaringly obvious, and AI will be blamed for it, just like we can blame, immigrants. When it's not immigrants that are causing a problem, it's other elements. I don't want to get too political on this, but it's very easy. It's very easy for our attention to be distracted, and we point to other things as the enemy or the problem, so that we don't spend time actually identifying the real problem and facing the real problem. And that's probably the boldest I've ever said it. Yeah.
So in your line of work now, what is the impact you are creating through that work?
Yeah. The field of future studies is huge, and there's a number of different ways futures work. So there's some who do research. There's a lot of, work done in education or in healthcare, government, social services, all those kinds of things. And obviously it's used by multinationals and by militaries. So futures thinking, strategic foresight is a very powerful set of tools and approach that every organization should be embracing. The work that I find myself doing is trying to make that accessible to everyday people. And one of the examples was I did a workshop, an online workshop, and my daughter, who was studying at university at the time, she came and attended Mom's workshop online. And at the end of it, she says to me, "Mom, this is so exciting. I can use this tool to plan my studies and my career." And when a university student says that they can use this foresight tool to work out something practical, then I knew that I was in the right direction. So I try to make it accessible to people. I try to demystify it. I try to demonstrate how these tools can be used in everyday situations, in your own small business, in your family life, in your health. Even some tools work really well. And I really help people to unpack their thinking. So why do we believe the way we do? Why do we defend certain policies or practices, even though they don't benefit us? Where is all of that coming from? So it's a very slow process to help people to unpack why they believe certain things about the future and how can they unpack that and then rebuild it so that they can have, we talk about a more preferred future. So you've got, possible futures and potential futures and a projected future, but maybe you want to be in that direction. How do we make decisions to move closer to what you would prefer in the future?
So you have written a book also about this topic, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I've written a couple of books.
Yeah. So what was the latest book about?
The latest book?
The Alchemist, Futures Alchemist.
Yeah, Futures Alchemist was the first one that I wrote in this field. And I wrote it, as many speakers do, is, we have a topic and we need to kind of mark out space. Like, this is what I believe. And I wrote it as a narrative instead of as a business, like a boring business book. So I often experiment and I try. One of my short books is written like a board meeting, and they're tabling various ideas and voting on it and discussing it. So I just like to explore different ways of doing that. But this one is written as a narrative of a young person. I actually had my daughter in mind, but a young person in financial services discovering futures thinking. And then how does she unpack that and learn it? And how does it apply to different elements of her career? And my husband sent it to a professional colleague of ours who's a futurist and asked him to write a foreword for me. And when I got the foreword back from him, he said, it's Charlotte's manifesto. And I thought, I didn't write a manifesto. And then I looked back at what I'd written and he was right, because I have kind of defined the things that I believe. I try not to judge other people's values and what they want out of life. But there are certain things that I feel, are selfish. Like a futures plan there's no reason for it not to be inclusive, to benefit all stakeholders rather than just a select elite few people. So I have defined some things that I think we should explore. But I've written about being a conscious futurist and about exponential thinking about the future, and a whole lot of ideas like that. Most of those books are short, so they're kind of like an hour read, but it's enough to kind of like spark an imagination and a conversation.
Wonderful. Yeah. So going back to your purpose, what do you think is your purpose now? Well, you said it is something which is evolving, but at this phase of your life, at this season, what is that?
Okay. I'm here in Malaysia, and we've spent some time, my husband and I, in Vietnam, and we're going to go back for a few months, and then we're hoping to go to China. And we're having conversations like this with other speakers, people who work with people, HR, and other futurists. And I just, not from an academic level, but from just a lived reality level, to have a conversation with other people in a part of the world that is not too familiar to me as coming from South Africa. Because when I get that challenge of a completely different culture, so like in Vietnam, we're in Da Nang, there's not many English speaking people there. We have to communicate via Google Translate on the phone. And the culture is different. The pace is different. It's just such an extraordinarily different way of living from what we assume people value as important. So if you were in Johannesburg in South Africa, the pace of life is really fast. If you go to Cape Town, it's more relaxed and you're going to do things over wine. If you go to Durban, like everybody's laid back and they want to go surfing. You go to Vietnam and they're all just like relaxing, having a cup of coffee, just taking life slowly. So it's those kind of little challenges to my thinking as a futurist about society and about what is important. But primarily what I'm trying to do is discover and talk about how Africa and Asia, or Southeast Asia, should be talking more, because we've got a lot in common in terms of our values and our respect for people and for different kinds of people and for older people that you don't get in other parts of the world. And the kind of respect for humanity and dignity, which is lost in a more Western approach where it's all about KPIs and profits and efficiency. And I have lots of colleagues who are very efficient, but they move so fast that they don't have time to understand what's really happening. So that's what I'm trying to learn and discover. So my purpose in this conversation, in this phase of my life, is just to have more conversations with people between Africa and Asia and see what we can learn from each other.
It's great.
Yeah.
So actually, the other thing is the purpose and passion. This is something I'm trying to marry. I ask everybody about this. So how can we differentiate, or how do you differentiate your purpose from your passion?
Yeah. That's an interesting question, because I've never thought of myself as an overly passionate person. And I've got things that I do that I find important, but I have found myself as a passionate defender of Africa. And I'll explain it this way, because we might not have this kind of conversation in this part of the world, but in South Africa, as a white person, there's a lot that we've gone through. When I went to school, we were still in segregated schools. And so the government only changed after I left school. So that obviously had a huge impact on how I think about the world. And I went overseas to the UK once, and I realized this as I was traveling, that we're called in South Africa, white people were called European. I'd never been to Europe, okay, but we were called European.
And you don't know how European
values. Yeah, and I had this opportunity to go to the UK, and was like, oh, no problem, because I can imagine how it works, okay. And then I was invited to go to Nigeria to speak, and I thought, well, I can't go to Nigeria. And that for me was a shock to realize that racial concept was so deeply embedded in me that I had that immediate reaction. So they do say that your first reaction is how you're raised, and your second reaction is the person you want to be. So I thought, I've got to deal with this. So, we've now traveled, my husband and I, to many places across Africa. But I still have this, you have this kind of hang up in South Africa as a white person, because you carry a lot of baggage and you want to apologize for everything the whole time, but you also want to move on and make progress, but you don't know what to do. But I was dealing with a colleague, a woman from Cameroon, a black woman from Cameroon, who lives now in South Africa. And she and I were talking, we were working on a project, we were meeting online a couple of times. And then she says, Charlotte, African women like us need to do, and she carries on. And it was the first time in my life anybody had called me an African woman. And it was like a moment in my life that, I've spoken about this from stage. It was such a pivotal thing to be recognized as that, and for my race not to be an issue in this conversation, because what we were trying to work on together was more important than that. And so I know that there's a lot of hang-ups, but I can see from the conversations that I've had with the speakers that I work with. I co-run a speaker bureau in South Africa, and the speakers that are in Africa are intelligent and full of wisdom and have so much value and are so good and so funny and so much value. Yeah. But there's this concept, because the continent has been dominated so much by colonialism, but there's this concept that's we fight against the whole time, that things in Europe are better than in Africa, that Africa is a poor continent, that we need people from North America to come and rescue us. And that's a lie. Okay, it's not just not true, it's a lie. Africa is an incredibly wealthy continent, but it doesn't look like it when our wealth is extracted and goes to Europe, and then they send back aid, and then they point to how much aid they sent to Africa, but it's because they extracted all the value in the first place. I'm trying not to be
it's a very interesting topic, I'm sure.
Yes, but so that ends up being my passion, because that's when I get really worked up, because there is so much value, and
I can feel it when you even speak that you are speaking with so passionately. So passionately about that topic. Yeah. So actually, this is what I'm telling people, is actually when they find their purpose, and if they are passionate about their purpose, then they have got really in their life. So we were having a small chat before the recording about becoming unretirable, and you also somebody from finance background. I am somebody from finance background, and you are also exposed to insurance annuities and pension annuities and things like that. And I was also involved in this at some point of my life. But the landscape is changing a lot, right? I mean, not technically, but because of the entire world population is actually aging.
Yes, yeah.
So governments or pension funds are trained to actually cope up with the demands for pensions and things like that as well. So this is where my concept of becoming unretirable becomes so important, because even if somebody has already planned for 20 years to retire in their life, they might not be able to. In fact, even in Maldives now, they have increased the compulsory retirement age to 75.
Okay.
Yeah, basically it was 65, but now they have 65. They can retire, but they can still work on a contract up to 75, which also highlights in the importance of actually recognizing that people are becoming more healthier at the old age, and so many aspects of this. What do you think about retirement? Are you going to retire?
Me, no. I have projects planned for my retirement. that I'm looking forward to one day being able to explore, but not retirement. And there's a lot of factors. One of them being, and you mentioned the global population is aging, but one of the fascinating things is if you look at the population pyramids of Africa versus Asia, Asia's aging, Africa is really, really young. Africa is the only continent, the only place where the population is so young. And that's something that Africa has to deal with. And that's why we need to be talking, because we're innovating in different ways with different kinds of constraints and considerations. And we need to be able to communicate more about that. You're right. We live longer. We live healthier. The world is changing. Technologies and skills and things are lost in a generation, because now you can automate things and people forget how it was done in the beginning. So there's a wisdom and a real experience that older people have that young people just don't even know that exists, and they don't know that they're missing it yet. We need more people to take care of older people. There's a whole question about taxes. So all of those issues. One of the approaches that I often talk about is saying to people, even if you were employed by a company, think of yourself as a business. You work for yourself and you've got a contract with this company. It doesn't matter what your employment contract, none of that. This is all in your mind. Okay. I have a set of services that I'm selling to this client for this month. And towards the end of the month, we're going to agree whether this contract is going to roll over for another year, another month or not. Do I want to still work with this client for another month or not? Are they going to change their requirements? So basically every single month you're going like, do I still have a job next month? And while that might be uncomfortable, I think the point is to be uncomfortable. You cannot afford to get complacent, because your company is not your family and they're not going to take care of you. And if costs have to be cut, you're going to be cut, so you have to think about that. And it's not about being rude or unfair. It doesn't matter. You have to take care of yourself and your family first. So you are a business. You've got these skills. So what does that mean? It means that you can say, how do I update the portfolio of skills that I have so that if I need a better client, I can find a better client in 2 months' time, 6 months' time, next year. So you keep investing in yourself. Doesn't matter what your HR, L&D plan is. None of that matters. How are you investing in yourself? You can then also sit down and plan out a career path. So you want to work for a few years. You want to go to another part of the world and work there to get some experience. Do you want to take some time off and go back to school and learn something? Do you want to take some time off and volunteer and go and do something in another part of the world, or build houses or something? Do you want to have a mini retirement? Take off, like a furlough, 3 months, and go and travel, or spend time with your elderly parents or with a grandchild, whatever it is, and then go back to work again. So you end up creating a portfolio career where it's interspersed with working for a company, working for yourself, and, getting freelance contracts, learning, experiencing, resting and recovering. And all of that becomes under your control. It's your portfolio. And one of the most important parts of that is to actually keep a record of that, to demonstrate what you're learning, what your experiences are. That the fact that you went and helped to build houses for 3 months, you learned these skills, you had this experience, whatever it is. You keep building that into your portfolio so that you become a better asset to a potential client, whether that client is for, a 6-week contract or whether you're going to be there for 6 years. That's my approach. So that way we never think of retirement being a benefit or a bonus at the end of our life, because we just, let's take a retirement now for 3 years and then work and do something different, or go back and, coach younger people because they don't know how the industry works. So your unretirable, I think it's one of the most important things we need to learn and grasp, is that that mindset is absolutely essential for a person in the future who wants to have a career that's under their control, where they're not at the mercy of some employer and their bottom line figures.
I think this is so profound, the way you have step by step explained it. I think this felt like a career coaching session. And you have been coaching as well, right?
Yes.
How did that came about? Because I'm also an ICF certified coach, and I have my reasons why I did the ICF certification. But how did
I haven't done the qualifications yet. And I need to, when I eventually get home for a while, I need to go back and to study and do a few of those things. But I've always tried to stay away from coaching because I didn't think that I had the patience for it. I didn't think that it was one of my skill sets. But there have been a couple of occasions where people have come to me and they've needed that coaching. And I seem to have a different approach of how I see things. So people can tell me something and I can reflect it back to them in a way that they discover what is innate that they didn't realize. And there've been some profound things that people have done. And I've really appreciated being part of their journey, just kind of touching on something so that they are then released to do the incredible work that each of them are doing and sharing with other people. So I love that. And what I've also tried very intentionally to do is to find clients in different parts of the world. So I've had clients in Cameroon, Germany, Dubai, Malaysia, and just so that as I'm talking to people and we're exploring things, that I'm also learning so that I don't get a narrow view of the world for myself.
Yeah, because that's what I also learned, because the coach learns as much as the coachee, right? During coaching conversation and during the meetings. So coming back to our own profession of professional speaking, how important it is actually to have a kind of a mindset, like a growth mindset, which I have been a huge advocate of growth mindset for a speaker.
I believe speakers are philosophers, because we're not just getting up and teaching something. There's a lot of trainers in our space and I respect that, but when we really work with a topic, we're thinking about the implications of that topic and how it affects other people and like the second and third order consequences of things. And we've got to research our topic and see it from different perspectives. And like if we're the coaching or doing Q&A after a talk, we're getting different perspectives on it. So it's our job to be that philosopher and to think about it, and then to find a way to articulate those ideas in a way that moves people, whether it moves their minds or their hearts or their hands to do something. But we need to be able to move them to consider and see things differently. So we're painting pictures of what the world could be. So I say to speakers, you're a philosopher. You're also a futurist, because you're helping people, guide them towards their more preferred future. So there's a whole lot of skills that we're doing. And we're also, in a sense, kind of casting a spell, because we're using words that, and I'm sure we can all, like I told that story about this friend who called me, an African woman. Her words changed something in my mind.
Yeah.
And made me see myself different. That's a spell, a really good one. And that's what we're doing. We're using words to help people to see the world a different way.
Yeah, because even something like, something as small as like, you've got this.
Yes.
Or you have it in you. For example, we have seen a number of times people comes back and say that, I have heard about you speaking about, for example, I speak about growth mindset.
Yeah.
And people come back and say that, it has so much profound impact on me. I've never heard about that concept of growth mind and fixed mindset, though it was invented by Carol Dweck. I have been speaking about it. So it is, like you said, it's so profound, the impact we can create, right? Yeah. So what is the ultimate satisfaction, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can tell you as an example, and I've spoken for many years and on different topics and things like that. So my very first topic where I started, and a couple of speakers start in a place like this of overcoming a problem, whatever the problem is. And for me, I lost a business and I wrote a book about my business failure, and I was marketing it, kind of like, in my town that I was in at the time. And I don't speak about it anymore, but, I did an updated video recently about the topic and it's still relevant. But right in the beginning, I was invited to come and speak in South Africa, we have Women's Day in August. There's a reason. So it was a Women's Day event, and every year the local Business Women's Association hosted this big event for schoolgirls in certain schools in the last 2 grades of high school. And they had a whole lot of things leading up to it, that the girls could write essays and they could win prizes and things like that. And they got given all goodie bags and exciting stuff during this conference. It was really, really well done. And I was asked by the organizers to come and speak about my business failure. And then they bought the book. So each girl in the room had a book from me. And I got up and I spoke to these young 16, 17-year-old girls about the mistakes that I made in business and the consequences, terrible consequences that it had in my life, and the lessons that I'd learned that I wanted to pass on to them. And then there was a bit of Q&A. Now, when you do Q&A with adults, they're a little bit more polite. With these young girls who are asking you very specific questions, they were cutting right to the, why would you make a decision like that? Didn't you see how it would? And it was really, they weren't trying to be rude. They were trying to understand. And I really appreciated that. And so at this point, I've done a good speech. I've passed some good information. I got paid for the books that are in their goodie bags. They've asked me good questions. It was lovely. But then the organizers had another surprise. So I think I'm finished. And then the organizer comes up, the MC, and says, no, just wait. The girls have got something for you. And this whole audience of girls got up and sang a song to me. And unfortunately, I can't remember what it is now, but it was a local song. But it was about seeing what you've gone through, and recognizing the progress you've made. That was essentially the lyrics. And so I'm standing there on stage crying because the audience is now speaking to me.
Yeah.
Because I shared vulnerably and honestly with them.
So it is kind of a therapy session for you.
It was beautiful. I was so moved by that. And that was for me, and it was like right at the beginning of my speaking career, it's still one of my highlights, because that's the magic or the alchemy that you have when you're sharing with integrity with an audience and they get it, and then it comes full circle and lives were changed. That's why we do this kind of work.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And I think you are doing a great job in terms of creating impact as well. And you have been serving as the past president of Global Speakers Federation as well as the African Speakers Federation. How was your experience in that?
Oh, very good. So Global Speakers Federation was really interesting because you're not dealing directly with the speakers, you're actually serving the association leadership. Yeah. So it's a very different experience from being president of the local speaking association. But to work with such incredible people with a real heart and concern for our speaking industry around the world. So that none of this was self-serving. Obviously, you get recognized because you're in that prestigious position, but none of us were making money from this. It cost a lot. It has an impact. But to be able to work with people around the world in exploring this, because then it's all cross-cultural and there's a lot of diplomacy and there's a lot of listening to people. And that was really interesting. I thoroughly enjoyed that. And I had to keep reminding myself, maybe we don't understand each other in the situation, but I absolutely know that this person wants the right thing and I want the right thing. We just have to work out what that is. So it was a lot of, not negotiation, but a lot of coming to understand each other. I was absolutely honored. And I was also the very first person from Africa to serve at that level, which for me was a profound privilege. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you were the president almost at the time we started the Modi's Professional Speakers Association.
Yeah.
I can remember that. Yeah. Thank you very much, Charlotte, for being on my podcast and giving some valuable information for our listeners. But there's one question I ask from every guest, because the podcast name is also, the Waves of Wisdom. So what is that one wisdom you have acquired over the years, or you have heard people have passed on to you, your elders, or some, something which you have hang on to and which you think you're going to hang on to, which you want to pass on to the next generation?
Wow. I know this is going to sound kind of lame and strange because it's not hugely profound, but for me it is really defining, is that ability to slow down and be curious. And I find a lot of us, especially in the speaking world, we're doing a lot of work to position ourselves. Like, this is who I am and my topic, and you've got to get the branding right because you want more opportunity to speak because this is our business. But sometimes if we stop and be curious, instead of always trying to promote, but to actually listen. And as a futurist, it's essential. It's like, I can't come in with the answers. I come in with my wisdom and experience and my learning. But what I have is nothing if I can't engage with you and we create something together. So it's slowing down, being curious, and then working out how to, I think I'm getting to my point, to co-create something.
Yeah.
Collaborate means I want to do something, you want to do it. We can do it together. We can co-brand it. But to co-create means
like what we have done with this podcast.
Yeah. So come and we're open to seeing what we can do together.
Yeah.
And that makes an impact on the world. But we can't do that if we're chasing deadlines and KPIs. We can't do that if we're always trying to position ourselves. We have to be humble enough to co-create.
Yes.
Yeah. And the people that I see doing that, the cultures where slowing down is respected as opposed to, being fast paced all the time. Yeah. That's what I want to explore.
Yeah. I think at the beginning you went, it's really rounded up with what you actually mentioned about your passion now, which is actually exploring other cultures like Asia and Africa, how Asia and Africa can come together and co-create, I think now.
Yes.
So that really wraps up. And then also one thing I found was you are also passionate about this identity crisis you had as a child, for example, and then how you overcame it. I think a lot of us have this identity crisis because we have this imposter syndrome or not good enough. We have it, right? So what is the best way? Like your friend made some remark for you to actually come out of it, but what is the ways consciously we can actually overcome that?
So I did a talk once. I was asked when I went to the Canadian conference, to speakers conference, and I had a mini keynote, 25 minutes, talk about Africa. And I'm going, it's a continent of 1.5 billion people and 54 countries, like 25 minutes. But I referenced a number of people.
Is it because many people in North America thinks it is a country?
Yes,
Africa?
But it's what I wanted to do was to bring just a few ideas to them and say, here are probably things that you've made a mistake about in terms of Africa, like the size and, the population and the religion and the, it's not a poor continent, all that kind of stuff. And so I brought that to them in a nice, fun way to say, just realize that we all have biases and stereotypes in our minds. You want to be aware of that before you work with a client, really get to understand your client so that you don't just assume that you know what's going on. So that was the crux of it. But one of the stories I told, and I've just gone and forgotten the woman's name, and I'll be really annoyed, but I'll pass it on to you. Yes. She did a TED talk about a single story, a Nigerian novelist. And this TED talk is about, she's Nigerian and she was studying in Canada or the US or something like that. And people were saying, you speak such good English, but like English is the main in Nigeria. It's a very dense country with lots of different languages and cultures and things. So English is the language that covers. And they could not understand, they could not relate to her because they had assumed that Africa was a certain way and she was challenging that just by being there and speaking in English. But she also wanted to write stories. And when she first started writing stories, she was writing stories the way she had read children's stories that all came from the UK. So she was writing about snow and robins. You don't get that in Africa. And she realized in this that people have a single story about Africa. And we very often have a single story about each other. We know something, we assume something, we label and define, this is how that person is. And that's wrong. So we need to be able to overcome that single story. And that is probably the most important part, to look at anybody and say, I only know this one element of you, but you're a fully rounded person. There's all these other experiences and things. And I can't judge you on this one facet. I can't assume what you believe, what your values are just by this one thing, because that's the only story I know about you. So if it's really important, I'm going to get to know you and get to know the other stories.
Great. I think that is a good way to end our podcast as well. But one thing which I actually forgot to ask you, which I wanted to ask when I see you, was actually, recently I have been hearing a lot about first principle thinking. So being a futurist, how important is this first principle thinking compared to your futuristic thinking?
Yeah, it's very important. My favorite tool in futures thinking is something called causal layered analysis. It sounds really hectic, but it's kind of like a iceberg model. And up at the top is the data and the litany that we see. When we want to change something in a company, we try and change it up there. Okay. And then we discover that beneath that, there's a system. The systems generate those results. So you can't change the results. You've got to change the system. The system comes from the worldview, the culture that we're in. And that worldview is based on the myths and metaphors we teach each other. We learn in a culture. We learn from our parents. And if you want to make any real change, you don't fiddle around at the top. you get right down to the bottom. So this is kind of like almost deeper than first principles. It's like, what are the myths and metaphors? The real, right at the bottom, what do we really believe? And if we want to make significant change, then we have to tell new stories. And out of new stories comes a new worldview, and then we can design better systems, and then the results take care of themselves. So we really have to get down to the bottom. Otherwise, we're just playing around at the top, just decorating.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. It's been a great chat, and I hope we do this again some other time. Yeah.
Thank you so much. A really interesting conversation. I appreciate your questions. Yeah.
Thank you. And for our listeners and viewers, until we come back again, don't forget to be unretirable and awesome. As Charlotte mentioned, don't keep on working. Take a pause and slow down and be curious about what you have been doing, what you need to do, and what others have been doing. Until we come back, thank you very much.